Last year ones. These are golfers who topped 20 last year. I think I'm projecting at least 2 golfers to be inside the top 10 from this bucket, up to 5. So when you're doing your research, I think if you play somewhere between 2 to 5, you're going to be fine. Last year, 2s is that 20 to 40 range. There are only 9 golfers in that bucket. We usually see around 12, so it's a little less than usual. It's a pretty high success rate and a high frequency rate. That's another thing for you guys to look at when you're reviewing this. Frequency rate just means every single year that I've been tracking this, we've seen at least 1 golfer inside the top 10 from that bucket. That's what frequency rate means. Success rate means of all golfers that have ever been in this bucket, how many produce top 10s? Like, what is the top 10 success rate? That's exactly what this bucket is. And you can compare how many golfers are in that bucket this year versus the average year in and year out. You can also look at the optimal lineup frequencies. All up to you. It's all at your fingertips. And when you're watching this, as I go through this, you can also keep that in mind. So yes, 0 to 1. Remember, we want a 2-point buffer. I even have a conservative projection, max projection over here at 2. So I would say anywhere between 0 to 2 golfers from this last year 2 bucket would be fine. And also, if you're following along on the cheat sheet, again, link in the description below, you can use the filter on this sheet, the DraftKings filter, to also filter out each of the buckets that I'm talking about. So you can come in here and see which golfers are in these buckets and basically go, oh, okay, Eric is saying we want somewhere between 0 to 2 last year 2s, or at least that's what he thinks is going to be inside the top 10, which of course, if you're aiming for the optimal lineup, you just want top 10 golfers. Like we're not trying to do anything other than. So that's how you can use this to your advantage. 0 to 2 is what I'm projecting out of last year bucket 2. Last year bucket 3, that's that 40 to 60 range. So golfers who finished, again, between 40th and 60th place, 0 to 2 there. 0 to 2 last year 4s. We do have 7 in that bucket this year where we normally see 6, but it's such a low forming bucket that I could ignore it completely. I don't know which golfers are in it, but I don't necessarily care. Last year 5s, 0 to 2 out of that bucket. And last year 6s, somewhere between 1 to 3. Now, this 3 is an even number, but I already checked it. When I open it up to the decimal points, it's actually above 3, which means we round up to 4. So technically, this is 1 to 4. Now, the conservative max projection is 3. I would probably feel more comfortable somewhere between 1 to 3. Just to give you a heads up, we have seen up to 4 golfers in the optimal lineup from this bucket. So kind of goes hand in hand with the max projection. So keep that in mind. Let's move on to the last week buckets and go through the projections there. Golfers who topped 20 last week at the Honda Classic. We're looking somewhere between 0 to 2 golfers from that bucket. Normally we see 13. We only have 11 this week. And it's not a high strength of field. Like the golfers in this bucket don't represent a very good strength of field point total. That goes into the projections. 0 to 2, I think, is pretty comfortable. With 11, and some of these guys, like Eric Cole is in this event. Do we think he, can he match his performance from last week to a tougher golf course? Well, actually, they're both tough. Bay Hill and PGA National, no slouches. They're tough golf courses, so maybe he can. Either way, my projection is 0 to 2. And then we kind of go down the list. It's 0 to 2 for anyone, for any of the buckets that played last week. So last week 1 is that top 20 finish, 20 to 40, 40 to 60, 60 to 80, and then missed cuts. So missed cuts and withdraws are in this bucket. Maximum is 2. Don't grab more than 2 golfers from each of these buckets. And if you really wanted my opinion, I probably am not. I'm not grabbing more than 3 golfers from the Honda Classic. I just won't. I'm going to try to limit myself from. Well, hold on. Let me back up. No more than 4. 4 is a conservative number. I would never build a lineup of all golfers that played in the Honda Classic from last week. You probably can't build a reasonable lineup anyways with just golfers from last week. But Yeah, I'm going to retract what I just said. I'm going to use a max of 3. Probably not going to do more than 3. Because like if you look at this bucket here, last week's sixes, golfers who did not play last week, it's 100% frequency rate. We usually see at least 2 golfers in the optimal lineup from this bucket. Now, I guarantee you those are probably really good golfers more often than not. But I'm projecting somewhere between 4 to 8 golfers from this bucket to be inside the top 10. If you grab at least 2 of these guys, if not 3, that already kind of limits how many golfers you can actually select from the Honda Classic. Which again, that would be my recommendation. I wouldn't play too many golfers from the Honda Classic. It's not a high frequency rate of finding top 10 finishers, but certainly a high frequency rate of getting golfers who did not play last week. Usually we see 50, and now we have 75, 74. So that's probably a huge reason why the projection is so large and why a lot of these are lower. But I think that's pretty solid. What I just said there, I think it's solid. Big Colts fan. I'm blanking on Ryan. How you feel about Eric Cole, the Hungry? Is that the nickname? Or he Hungry? Okay. Yeah, I don't know, man. That was a tough test for him last week. I don't know if that's going to drain his energy or if that's going to benefit him. Maybe he got hardened because of that. I don't know. Little less, or there's less water, so you think it's a little easier. I don't know. Wind is going to be a huge factor. Last week there was no wind at the Honda Classic, so wind is definitely going to play. Wind is the worst element that a golfer can face. So even if there's less water, wind can put you in some weird situations and some bad lies. I would actually choose more water than wind at any golf course. But once you include wind, it gets dicey fast. Moving on to our course history buckets. Course history 1. These are golfers who have top 20 finishes. Like their average finish at this course. Better than 20th place. That's what includes in course history 1. And I'm projecting somewhere between 1 to 3. Finishing inside the top 10. We usually see 11 per year. We have 9 this year. A lot of strength of field points go towards it, 26% of the field. And we usually see at least one of these golfers inside the top 10 every single year. Also inside the optimal lineup every single year. So when you hear those podcasts saying course history is pretty sticky at this event, here's further proof. Not only you're getting kind of surface level analysis that way, I'm providing more deeper optimal lineup and top 10 frequencies. It goes hand in hand. Also to go along with that is your course history 2 bucket. 1 to 4 is what I'm projecting to be inside the top 10 there. We have 28 this year, where we normally see 22. And we usually see at least 1 inside the top 10, but not at least 1 inside the optimal lineup. That actually has a 60% frequency rate. So it's not for certain that you're going to get an optimal lineup golfer from this bucket. But I think if you were just to use this, if you were to choose at least 1 golfer from this bucket, I think it's going to be fine. Because the top 10 frequency rate is kind of what I'm banking on. The next couple buckets are 0 to 2. So basically any course history that isn't the best course history, you want 0 to 2 from each of those buckets. And then followed up with no course history. Believe it or not, 75% frequency rate of having a golfer from this bucket inside the top 10, and also an 80% frequency rate of being in the optimal lineup. So golfers who have never played this course before, don't shy away from them. Now, I would say maybe just play 1, maybe at most. Hard to tell what these golfers are by just seeing this kind of from a surface level standpoint. If we were to dig into it and see which golfers were actually there, I think we're going to see Tyrrell Hatton. I think the year he won, he didn't have course history. Let me double check. So like Lucas Herbert in 2022 did not have course history. in 2021. I don't know if that's right. Is that the first time Jordan Spieth's ever played? Arnold Palmer. My data goes back to 2013. So I believe he was a rookie in 2015. Maybe last year was his first year. So, I mean, high quality golfer, that's included in that bucket. I don't have anyone in 2020, so that's where it would have failed. European golfer in Rafa. Rookie, I believe, in Sungjae that year. Keith Mitchell, Matt Wallace, another European in Wallace. Keith Mitchell, I don't know if that was his rookie year. It was one of his first couple years. Nothing in 2018. And then Tyrrell Hatton in 2017. So his fourth place finish. So just to give you a heads up, it's probably it's mostly European golfers that make up that bucket, like top 10 finishes in this course history 6 bucket. So keep that in mind. Moving on to the recent form buckets. So this is basically telling you if golfers have good recent form versus bad, how many you want to play from each of these buckets. It's pretty heavily tipped towards the better recent form that you're playing, the higher success rate. We're going to have a golfer inside the top 10. 100% frequency rate of golfers coming in with the best recent form to have at least one golfer from that bucket be inside the top 10. We've had a max up to 3, and I'm projecting anywhere between 1 to 3 to be inside the top 10. 100% frequency rate, 60% frequency rate in the optimal lineup. So keep that in mind, because like Jon Rahm would be in this bucket right now. There's no saying that he's going to be in the optimal lineup. He would probably have to win the tournament in order to be in the optimal or be in a top 3. So can't, really include him. Well, no. That's not what I mean. Be cautious, I guess, with that bucket. It does say 100% frequency rate. Jon Rahm could finish inside the top 10, finish 9th place. Same with Rory. He could finish 9th place and not be in the optimal, and maybe not even be in the GPP winning lineup. Could be a balanced build. So just keep that in mind. I don't know. Let's take a look. I want to see which golfers are actually in that bucket before I, say anything worse about it. Rahm, Scheffler, Rory. Yeah, okay. So we know one of these guys is going to be inside the top 10, right? It's got to be. Yeah, just giving you more confidence to play one of those guys, basically. That was course history. I meant to look at recent form. Let's do that again. We have Rahm, Scheffler once again, and then a slew of 9K golfers. I think we're going to see one guy from here. Even Seamus Power, I think, would have a pretty decent success rate, or a success at this golf course. Definitely has the possibility to. Okay, so recent form 2, I'm looking at somewhere between 2 to 4 just from the original projection, but because this max isn't over 3, this rounds up to 3, which bumps down the minimum to 1. Weird rules, I understand, but because this isn't over 3, I just naturally bring the minimum down to 1, and so now this reads 1 to 4 is what I'm projecting to be inside the top 10 for recent form 2s. I imagine Rory's in that bucket. Yeah, of course. Yep. Okay. Yeah, and a bunch of good golfers in this bucket. Okay. So recent form 3s, same thing, 1 to 3 there, and then 0 to 2 with the rest of the buckets. Definitely want good recent form. Frequency rates for these bottom 2 buckets, not super great. So I would avoid people who, we have 8 golfers in these 2 buckets combined. I think you could probably avoid these guys pretty easily. It's including golfers who've not been on the PGA Tour this year. That's basically what this bucket 6 is. They haven't played in the last 7 weeks, or last 7 weeks. So you probably ignore those guys and be okay with it. But that's going to conclude the recent form buckets. I see no questions. Moving on, we're going to talk about salaries. So we kind of already went through the pass optimal lineup and GPP winning lineups. Now we're going to talk about, what the projections are from each of the salary ranges. So we already talked about how a 10-9-8 is a pretty good start, and maybe 3 7s or 2 7s and a 6, something like that. Kind of goes hand in hand. 0 to 2 is what we're projecting to be inside the top 10. That's because there's only 3 golfers in that bucket. Well, I already talked about how I don't like the salary structure that DK is kind of deploying. making it really soft pricing. I don't know if it really benefits me. Obviously, I did well last week, so I guess the jury's out for me as to if I really truly hate it. But when there's only 3, that doesn't really give this that high of a success rate, like that high of a projection. But our best golfers are in the 10K range. And there's a 100% frequency rate of at least producing 1 golfer from this range inside the top 10. Not so much when it comes to optimal lineups. So if we're thinking about pairing 2 guys up together, we're probably not going to get the optimal lineup that way. Despite how soft pricing is, where you could probably put 2 10K golfers together, probably not ideal. Going to like 9K golfers, somewhere between 1 to 3 seems to be pretty solid. 100% frequency rate there, at least 1 to be inside the top 10. So in fact, even if we go all the way down, look at all of the minimums for frequency rates. 10, 9, 8, 7. We see at least 1 in each of those being inside the top 10. So what this is really saying is, again, salaries matter because it's DraftKings is using odds, its own algorithm, but it's closely rated to like Vegas odds or just anyone's odds on any of the books. Pretty darn close to how the salaries go. And this is just telling us the cream rises to the top. So keep that in mind. I think starting 10, 9, 8, 7 is definitely the approach that I'm going to be doing this week. And I think it's probably, if you're building limited lineups, you're building like say up to 10 lineups, starting 10, 9, 8, 7 is probably in 70% of your lineups the way to go. So keep that all in mind. I'm not going to talk more about salaries. We kind of already went over it with the pass optimal and GPP winning lineups. Let's move on to the strokes gain buckets. And then from here, I think we just get right into the strategy portion of it. Strokes gain 1. I looked at this earlier today and I thought to myself, that's crazy. I have 28 golfers in that bucket this year where I normally see 15. Now, I think there's a couple reasons why this is. One, I think I've had at least 2 years now worth of collecting my own strokes gain data and providing it in my own spreadsheets. So with that, I use raw strokes gain data. None of it's adjusted. Prior to 2 years ago, I was using all PGA Tour data, which is adjusted. So when it's adjusted, now we get closer to 0 numbers than if we were using raw strokes gain stats. So I think that's why we see kind of this huge increase in numbers. Some of these are pretty standard though, and maybe not. Maybe COVID had a lot to do with it because, or maybe, I don't know. Usually we see 10 to 11 golfers who have 0 strokes gain data, where we only have 1 this year. That doesn't seem, I mean, all these numbers are pretty darn similar, except for this one. So this is the only big difference. So we remove golfers from here and we add them to here. It doesn't make any sense to me, and I guess I'm not going to try to make sense of it now. I'm just pointing it out to you guys so you don't feel like super odd about this. But with that being said, I'm projecting somewhere between 3 to 6 golfers to be inside the top 10 in the strokes gain 1 bucket, which means all stats are positive over the last year. That makes sense, right? These are your best golfers. Yeah, I don't have an issue with that, especially when there's 28 of them. We're already making a high quality, basically what we're doing is we're making a high quality bucket, a volume bucket to go along with it, meaning there's just that many more really good golfers in this bucket. Of course, we're going to find most of our projections going towards this bucket to be inside the top 10. So I don't know if you can actually get more than 3 or 4 golfers in your lineup from this bucket. So even though the max projection says 6, it might be difficult to have more than 3. So just keep that in mind. And the rest of the buckets are 0 to 2. So do with that as you will. Obviously, this bucket down here, there's only 1 golfer in it. Obviously, it's going to be 1. 0 to 1. But yeah, the rest of the projections are going to be 0 to 2. So, Chad, that was my quick version of that. I don't know if you're still in the chat, but yeah, we went over that pretty fast comparatively relative to how I typically do it. So that covers all the buckets.